Hi, everybody. David Nour. Want to welcome you to another episode of our Intelligent Growth. We're live on, LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. And I am I'm sad, but I'm excited. I'm sad that my business partner, Jen Courts, who's my co-host, couldn't join us today. She's heads down on a client engagement. I'm excited to welcome a recent friend, but somebody that you just, I don't know if this happens to you or not, but you meet somebody and we got introduced through Ray Harris, who's the CIO CISO at Adtran. Great guy. I've known him for a number of years. Great client. And I'll find out how the two of you met. But he introduced me to Diedre Downing, who's the Chief Learning Officer at StoryIQ. Diedre, welcome.
Hi, thanks, David. Happy to be here. And again, excited for this conversation. And we'll have to connect with Jen at another time.
Right. And so remind me, how did you and Ray meet?
We were at a conference, a Chief Information Officer conference, and actually I ran a session similar to what I'm going to talk about today. And he was like, hey, what you're sharing, Nour will love, and the magic was made.
I love it. And I got to tell you, he's become president of your fan club because he called me and said, I met this woman and really smart company, and I want you guys to connect. And he put us together. It's been a great conversation since. For our audience, we're going to talk about a really important topic today, which is this idea of data storytelling. And it's ask most leaders, and they'll tell you that many organizations that we meet, we talk to, we strategize with around particularly their growth strategy, they genuinely believe that they're data rich, but actionable insight poor. So we have a ton of data. Either we can't coalesce it and synthesize it into the best story to kind of help us tell that story, or that kind of what that data means, or we just don't do a very good job of cascading that data throughout the organization and creating transparency and creating conversations and creating a better understanding of where we're going, how we're going to get there, what's working, what's not working, what are the levers that we can manipulate as a team to really help take advantage of opportunities or meet challenges or opportunities. And that's why, in talking to Diedre, we thought this would be really helpful in sharing some of these ideas, some of these insights and perspectives. But before we do that, Diedre, let's take a macro to micro. Could you start with a brief introduction of you, your background? How did you end up where you are now?
Yeah, it was a path I never would have planned for myself back in, I don't know, when you start thinking about those things when you're 12 or 13. I have a background in finance and economics, and age myself here. When I was graduating college in the early 2000s, New York City had a huge shortage of teachers. And I went to school in New York, and I had internships and was riding the subway. And every time you rode the subway, you were hit with this ad that said, you remember your first grade teacher's name, who will remember yours? And it sort of hit me. And I was like, well, whatever I'm doing, right, is not going to be super memorable. And so I joined this program to teach for 2 years. And it was supposed to just be 2 years until I sort of figured out my life. And that turned into 10 years as a high school math teacher in New York City. And it was wonderful. The grass is always greener. There were certainly frustrating days, but it really made me appreciate sort of how much people have to learn and how receptive they are to things that might be new to them. After those 10 years, I found myself in the New York City Department of Education admin offices, helping them create programs for adult learners, dealt with tons and tons of data, and really started my data storytelling career there, thinking about how you communicate things to the executive director or the chancellor, or we were run by a Gates grant, so your grants manager. And then I found myself at StoryIQ, where I could put two things together, my love of teaching and my love of data. And I've been here now for about 4 years. Really great organization. I've had the pleasure of being a part of its growth and seeing through our challenges of COVID, and really helping to think about how we upskill professionals in what their needs are in data, whether that's communicating with data, which we'll talk more about today, but it could also be anything along the data literacy spectrum. So from just understanding data in a practical sense to doing the technical analysis, and then what we're going to talk about today, the communication piece.
Love that. So thank you for that background, and it's Omen's work to both my parents were teachers, and especially New York City schools. What a phenomenal opportunity to make a difference in the lives of those kids. Talk about StoryIQ, kind of at a high level. What do you guys do? Who do you do it for? How do you make a difference in the work and lives of your clients?
Sure. We are, if we just boil it down, a corporate training company. And what we do is we work generally with larger organizations who are implementing digital transformation or digital, data literacy work. And we build learning programs to help move people along that spectrum, whether it's just getting comfortable with data, right? So I take for granted that numbers just make sense to me and I was immersed with data, but many people aren't. And so we help create programs that get people used to data, how they might use data, bias in data, et cetera, all the way through to technical programs. So building dashboards, thinking about communicating through dashboards, and then this communication piece of data storytelling. And we really help to develop really customized programs for large and small organizations to help really upskill their professionals in a way that's going to make their data valuable. And I love what you said, right? We're all data rich, but insight poor. We try to work on that insight poor piece and make it more valuable.
So a lot of our audiences are P&L leaders or the lead a functional group. What's the fastest way to implement a data storytelling concept and really simplify sharing that insight, sharing that analysis?
It's really getting straight to the point. And we'll see some examples of this, but so often we throw as many words or numbers around as possible in data because we want to perhaps cover ourselves or anticipate what our boss might want, but it just becomes confusing. And if there's one thing you want to do to start communicating with data more clearly and effectively right away, it's cut that out and just tell people what you need them to know. Get straight to the point.
And I've found, probably like you, I've found if you pontificate or go on tangents, you're going to lose me at hello. It's like, okay, I don't need to, most people, I don't need to see a 36 tab spreadsheet. Can you just boil it down, particularly executives, right? Can you boil it down for me of what does this mean? Where are we going? And I love our conversation of, a point versus two that create a line versus three that give you a trend. And now what can we do about the direction? So how do I communicate to my team that what I care about so they can align their data? You and I see a lot of people present their information, and you hate to say it, but some people present data like you said there, you be quiet. Let me tell you how smart I am, and I'm going to take you through all of this. And I'm like, okay, time out. I don't need all of that. What I need is what do I need to know to make a decision, to support you, to back you, to go to bat for you, to sponsor you. Talk to me about how do you really communicate to your team so that they can present the most kind of compelling data instead of all of it.
Yeah. It's really knowing what your end results and your stakeholders and who your stakeholders are, because we all need different things. And you might have the same report that goes to 5 different departments and they all need different things. And if you're sharing the same thing every time, that's when you lose them. I like to call it the executive glaze, right? The glaze over the eye when you just give them stuff and you're like, oh. Right, but I need to know the bottom line. And so it's really adjusting and knowing your stakeholders, knowing what's valuable to them and what they need to make decisions and move things forward.
For our audience, if you just joined us, you're listening to Diedre Downing, Chief Learning Officer at StoryIQ. We're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. I encourage you to jump in. If you have any questions, comments about data storytelling, would love to have you jump in and participate. If not, I've got a whole list of questions that I'm going to go through, and Diedre's got some great information we want to share as well. Of the many tips you share about, get to the point and simplify the complex and tell me kind of what I need to know. Is there most impactful advice I can share with, executives certainly get it and they want you to boil it down, but go down to maybe the entry level or the frontline contributors. How do I coach and mentor kind of the younger members of our culture? And then I'm going to ask you to flip the coin. What's the worst advice I can give them about the data that they share?
Oh, all right. Well, if I had to pick one, and that's a tricky one, right? I think it's really making sure that they, particularly your more junior members of your team, are focusing on the story. And what I mean by that is that they really understand, again, the stakeholders and what they need, and to bring them into that. And I know, especially when, I was younger in my career, I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew what people needed, but I didn't. And so often telling people what you need, right? Telling your team what it is you need out of this data, what you want to focus on, is really going to help them develop the story that's going to be valuable for you and save you time in the long run. So just really focusing on that narrative, because a great story 9 times out of 10 can save a terrible or very confusing data visualization. The opposite is not true, right? Data is not going to save our words. And so just being really clear with what you want someone to walk away with is probably the first most valuable piece of advice I would give.
How about the opposite? What's the worst thing I could tell them?
Yeah. Focusing on the details. People get really into like creating a cool visualization and they get real nitty about where they're putting labels or what color things are, and it overtakes the purpose. And what we'll talk a little bit about today is that we want our visuals to support our message, not detract from it, but we don't want to get obsessed. We ourselves don't want to get distracted by our visuals. So stay out of the nitty gritty, keep it high level, and keep it clear.
Yeah, I've also seen the alphabet soup, right? Every industry has them. Let me go through the jargon, nth degree of detail. And I'm like, okay, hold on a second. I think I'm pretty intelligent, but you kind of lost me at hello.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we bring it to the essence of the key story you want to tell? And yeah, as soon as you get into that, I've always said, leave them wanting more. You start to get into that minutia. You start to get in that nth degree of detail. You're gonna lose the forest from the leaves, right? And it just kind of doesn't go well. How do I define the key takeaways of that data story that really help kind of inform the recommendations, or I'd like to say defend the recommendations that I make on here's where we should go, or here's how we should implement this project, or the levers that I believe if we manipulate will create the outcomes we're after?
Yeah, and this is where knowing your organization and knowing your data is really going to come into play, because we can do such complete analysis where we can have analysis paralysis, right? You have so much data, so many what you think are insights that can cloud your vision. And the way that you can really think about making sure that you are elevating those insights that are going to be valued by your stakeholders is thinking about their feasibility, thinking about how they tie to the company and or your stakeholders' overall goals, and making sure that they're linked, that they aren't disparate ideas that are going to take capacity or resources from all these different teams. You want to really think about the feasibility from the view of your stakeholders.
So you brought up that you have a finance background. I've seen technical experts in different fields, when they get in a room, Diedre, they do this Vulcan mind melt, right? You don't have, nobody even has to talk. They kind of pick up, I'm picking up what you're laying down, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you communicate data analysis in particular to non-technical audiences, right? If I'm parts of marketing where I'm really passionate about brand, or I'm parts of, customer success where I'm really focused on, first call resolution and those kinds of things. I'm not necessarily into a kind of a technical data analysis world, if you will. How do you engage them? How do you create buy-in from those folks?
Yeah, it's really about creating an opportunity where everyone can engage with the information. If someone technical is using jargon or talking about, for example, the results of their hypothesis test, right? You're going to tune right out. You're not going to think about, what maybe you're having flashbacks to Stats 101, for example. What's important is what they found and what you can do with it. And so what I tend to share with more technical individuals is to take a step back, and anything where you're about to say what you did or how you did it, cut it out. Because what matters is what you found. And that's sort of the biggest way to, I think, bring non-technical people in, is don't talk about the technical. If they want to know, then they'll ask. And I would like to think we generally trust our data teams, and we don't want to, nitpick with their methods or where they got their data from. That's for a different conversation. You don't need to prove your validity. Just tell them what they need to know.
I love it. So we've got a question. Cameron, thanks for jumping in. How do you present a story with multi-stakeholders in the room? And Diedre, I've been there, right? You've got board members, you've got senior executives, you got some maybe junior people, or you've got different functional groups, and they're at different levels in the organization. They need to have different needs of the data you're presenting. How do you, what's the right balance between making everybody in the room happy?
Yeah, it's like my nightmare scenario, right? Everyone from every level is there. Who do you plan for? And the tongue-in-cheek answer is that who makes the most money, because they're making the decisions. But that's ultimately probably not the right call. I think when you have that many stakeholders in the room, you have to keep it really general. Again, really high level, not specifically, let's say, what the finance team is going to do or what the junior accountants are going to do, but what the organization is going to do. and then have an opportunity later on for those different levels to dig in. But if you get too in the weeds in one level of a person in the room or one stakeholder, you're going to lose the rest of them. And there's better opportunities to facilitate discussions than a general presentation with those stakeholders.
The other thing that I found really useful is I tend to start macro and then drill down and then kind of get a little micro. And the other, just kind of facilitating, moderating conversations. The parking lot is a really good an analogy idea. If you don't want to kind of, if it doesn't include the broader audience or they're not going to get value out of it, I don't want to dismiss that person. So let's, hey, why don't I put that in the parking lot and I actually capture it, and let's either one-on-one or after the session, happy to discuss that. And I think that's a great way to do that. So thank you for that, Cameron. Let's see. Jacobus is running in. Love that how you did it doesn't matter. What does it mean?
Well, and I am not a data scientist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm interested in it and I understand some of the work, but I can't execute on it. And often people who are very technical want to tell you what they did, right? They want to tell you what code they wrote or what tests they ran or how they, brought this into their software. And that stuff ultimately doesn't matter to the decision maker, right? So the how you did it, the actual technical stuff, tell it to your friends. Talk about it at happy hour. Don't bring it to your leaders.
Yeah, if we all spend less time trying to prove how smart we are, I think a lot of these would go a lot further along. So let me give you a scenario, and I'd love your take on this. So I've got an audience. I've presented my data story. Let's be honest, they're all in the room, right? You've seen this posture, right? They're skeptical about my recommendations. How do I navigate? How do I get their buy-in? How do I navigate that environment? How do I do that in a way that gains buy-in, gains that the believability, if you will, of what I'm presenting?
Yeah. And this is where your expertise in your company and your decision really comes in, because people are going to be all over. I like to call it the data skills and skepticism matrix, right? Some people are going to be really high level of data and they're going to want so much detail and advanced charts and want to know exactly, the key numbers. But they might be really skeptical of what you're doing. And so that group, you need to back up what you're saying with data, right? They're going to be the ones who dig into those data points. They might be the ones that you're breaking out the appendix a little early to prove your point. But there's other people that the data is what makes them skeptical, right? They're like, sure, throw all these numbers at me. What does that really mean? And this is where you want to step back and simplify, really thinking about basic visualizations, good storytelling techniques, so that you can bring them in. And sort of making sure you've done your homework. What's worked before, what hasn't, maybe speaking to that again with data to back it up. But you can't just roll in there with your thoughts. You need to think about the whole perspective that you're considering to get that buy-in.
Yeah. I've always said, everybody's favorite radio station is WIIFM. If I'm sitting there and listening to a presentation, what's in it for me? How do I either do my job better or close the knowledge gap between what I think I know and what I need to know? And again, how can I benefit from this? So Diedre, one of the coolest things you've shown me in a previous conversation is kind of your 5 Ds. I'd love to, with your permission, kind of bring that up and have you take us through kind of this method, this process you talk about in how to best get data across. Is that a fair description of the 5 Ds?
Yeah, definitely. And, I love the 5 Ds because I love a framework. I love to teach people who are time poor practical ways to bring skills into their work, right? And not load them down with new things they need to learn or stress about. And that's where the 5 Ds really comes in with data storytelling. And you can see them all here on the screen, but we're going to go through them in order with an example because I feel like the visual is really powerful in data storytelling as well. So we're going to think about how we define the key takeaway, right? That sticky message that we need someone to carry through, and the hook, right? The what's in it for me right from the start. And then we're going to draft. And this is the part that everyone hates, right? The planning. But it's really where the power in the story is. So that's our second D. It's so important. We're going to think about drafting our storyline. And then we're going to get into the display. How does our visual support our verbal? And we're going to think about that through the display we pick, how we declutter and really focus on the information that matters, and some techniques for directing attention and making sure that your point is understood and supported, right? And I'd like to think about this. We need to continue to think about what context is needed, and that'll lead us to design. not the other way around. Sometimes we want to design something and make it fit, right? A square peg in a round hole. We need to do that context planning first. Right.
Love that. And again, the friend of mine calls something brilliant, so simple that nobody else has thought of. So you're right. I also like frameworks, and the 5Ds really help me think about, the audience I'm trying to engage. I always think about what is it that they need to know? What are they going to forget all that I want to tell them? And you brought up, I think, a salient point. I have the appendix in my back pocket. Someone either wants to know more, I promise you, they're going to ask. Or if they challenge some of your assumptions or assertions, how did you get there? Or tell me about the data set. I'm glad you asked. Boom, let me show you kind of where that is. But what do they need to know to kind of, again, decide, support, join, kind of take that, I want to influence their thinking and their call to action. And I love the 5D because it directs you. It kind of guides you in that journey. You think you want to take us through each of these?
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful for our viewers here. So I have an example, and I'm going to apologize in advance. It is perhaps a little bit bright, but this could be something that you see regularly, right? We have a customer satisfaction survey from an eye care contact center. Perhaps eyesore of a chart is maybe a better way to describe it. But what do we see here, right? There's so much there that if you're presenting on this, you might have really great things to share about this data, but you've lost me right from the beginning.
And before you go on, literally first time I saw this, my eyes are like all over the place. Like what is it that you want me to look at? And I'm trying to make sense of it while you're talking. The other thing I tell a lot of people is if you make me spend a lot of calories trying to understand what you're presenting, my mind's gonna go to bacon wrap dates, right? You're gonna lose me at hello. I'm not listening to a word you're saying because I'm spending all my calories trying to figure out what am I looking at and what would I care about this data.
Yeah, and really, data storytelling in a nutshell is making people work less, making them think less, which sounds a little counterintuitive, but you'll see as we move through, it's really quite easy, and it helps you move through the importance of what you're sharing so much more easily.
Love it.
So look, this is a disaster. Let's give it the 5Ds treatment. So the first thing we want to do is defining our key takeaway. And this is where you need to know the background. You need to know the problem. And in that last chart, we could see we've got weekly customer customer satisfaction surveys. And what might be difficult to tell there is we're actually getting more dissatisfied customers early on, and that's decreasing. Important, what we're looking for. But we need to make sure that that's what we're showing. And there's tons of different ways that you can define. There's placemats. This is our version. We've got the audience situation complication. You might have situation complication resolution, right? There's all these frameworks. Doesn't matter what you use. The idea is that you're thinking about the key components, right? Who it is that you're going to be talking to, what it is they need to know, right? Or any background. And in this case, the satisfaction of the call center's performance was declining, which you know because your head was in the data. But if you look at that chart, you don't know. What happened? Well, they trialed some new AI software to see if that chatbot helps improve customer satisfaction. And the key takeaway, the big thing, right, is that it did, and it should become a permanent feature. That's it. That's our headline. But often it's buried. And so by taking that time to define, we have the opportunity to really clear our thoughts and think about where's the spotlight going in this data viz or data story.
You're gonna love this. Full disclosure, I took a 6-week comedy class. Don't worry, I'm not about to give up my full-time job to become a stand-up comedian. But what one of the comments that really resonated is if the punchline isn't worth the setup, you're gonna lose the audience. And that's exactly what I think about as you do this, right? If that key takeaway doesn't come out, it's not worth that all the stuff you did to set it up, because you're right, it gets lost in all the details and all the minutia, and the big aha moment gets lost in all the details. And I think a lot of people do that unintentionally, but it's because they're presenting all this information that is not relevant to what you've underlined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Right. If the punchline isn't worth it, don't work up to it. And I think that's the key thing is you're thinking about your insights. You asked earlier, right? How do you decide which insights you're going to use? Well, which ones are valuable? And I love that. Like, is it worth it? Is that punchline worth the buildup? It's not worth talking about that data if the recommendation or the value isn't there.
All right. So I've got this part down. What's next?
Well, then we're going to draft. And this is just a single example that we're using here. So we're not really building a full presentation, but this is where you do the hard work of taking all of the information you have access to and winnowing it down into a story. And there's a few things I like to think about here. So I talked about earlier the skepticism data comfort matrix, right? I love a 2x2 scale here. And so really thinking about your key members of your audience, this can help drive sort of the level of detail that you go into with the data, how much background you need, right? What level of technicality you bring in. But sometimes it's really helpful to just put your audience somewhere on this 2x2 and use that as a guide for how deep am I getting? Then once you have sort of key ideas, I like another framework. Frame, explain, arrive. Right? You all know the rule of threes. We say something 3 times so it sticks. The first time, no one hears it. The second time, it's starting to make sense. The third time lands the plane. We want to do the same thing when we're drafting our story. We want to make sure that we've given enough context and background for someone to understand why you're coming to them with this information or this recommendation. You need to provide the right level of detail that supports your answer. And then you got to tell them why, right? The what's in it for me. And having some clear next steps, clear ideas that you need to walk away with. In the case of our example, we need to keep the chat box. That's going to be your driver in setting up your story.
So can I practice this with you?
Please.
So what I'm going to present is our research over the last 90 days of this unique kind of market or unserved market need. I'm going to show you our solution that we've designed, we've developed, we've piloted, and the results from it. And what I need your help with are these next 3 steps. Is that a good approach?
Yeah, that sounds really clear. And this is where frame, explain, arrive. I know it says 1, 2, 3 up there. The order isn't set in stone, right? Some people, you might need to tell them either what's in it for them or what they need to do next before they start listening to you. And that's often true with executive levels, right? Just get straight to the point before you dive into the details. The key is that you've got all 3 elements, so you're building a complete story, but you may play around with the order.
Love it. Love it. All right.
All right. So we've drafted. I wish it was as easy as those 5 minutes not even 5 minutes, 2 minutes we spent talking about it. That's really where the work goes in though. You build out a storyboard, think about your points, do the editing, right? Pulling things out, tucking it into your appendix. Don't discard it, tuck it into your appendix. But that's where the drafting comes in. So you've got a clear storyline, you know what you're going to follow, and now you need to visually support your verbal argument with display. And I think we can all agree that this is terrible.
Yeah, that's not it. That's not it. That's going to lose most people.
Yeah, right? Like, done. It's not even that the chart is so bad, and it is. It's that we have what I call a Stats 101 title, right? This is the data that you're sharing. It's not telling me anything about why you're sharing it with me, right? This is your first opportunity to reduce the work for your stakeholders. Boom, lead with your message, right? Customer satisfaction has improved since the chatbot implementation and should be a permanent feature. Now, you might need to search for that data, but you know why you're looking at it, right? And this is where I said before, a title can save a bad visualization, but the reverse is often not true.
It's almost like a guiding light of, I'm going to lead you down the path I need you to go, which is, here's the so what. I often think about, you're going to love this. What, so what, now what, right? Mm-hmm. So what is it that we're talking about? So what? Why is it relevant? Why does it matter? How is it impactful? Now what? What do you want to do about it? What should we do about it? What support do you need? What obstacles are in your way? So on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, again, right, we're gonna cut right to the chase. We're gonna cut out the BS. We're gonna stop patting ourselves on the back for all the work we did, and we're gonna get to what our stakeholders really need. The visual is bad. And I could nerd out with all of you on why you might choose different visualizations, what are the different visualization types out there. I'm going to follow my own advice here and just cut right to the chase. This should be a line chart, right? It's showing trends over time. We're going to be able to see what's happening much more clearly. My eyes like uncross. I start breathing a little easier. This is the more appropriate display that supports the message.
Is it fair to say even this can get overcomplicated and drag people into the minutia?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I don't know how many of you are staring at your screen right now, trying to see what those numbers on the labels are, right? And just, yeah, you get caught up in one thing. This is a better starting point. It's not our ending point.
Got it. Okay. So where do we go from here?
Yeah. Well, you're going to feel good about this. We're going to declutter.
Yes.
We are going to take things out. We're going to, embrace our inner Marie Kondo and just strip out anything that, I like to say, it's not that it doesn't bring you joy, but it doesn't bring immediate value to your message. And so when we do that, I'll give you the before. Again, everyone, hope that's burned into your retinas. Once we declutter, step one, get rid of those grid lines and reduce our x-axis. But this is still rough, right? We still have all those labels, like it's a little better, it's a little clearer, but this is where you step back and think about, what do people care about?
Pause for me a second. Cameron is thinking exactly what I'm thinking. Oh, but wait, there's more. No. Hold on a second. I want to beat you over the head with more details of all this information that I have to get out of my system and share with you immediately.
Right.
And nobody needs that. Nobody needs all the information. And I've always said, I promise you, if they want to know, they'll ask. So the more I love this, and I can't wait to see the rest of the decluttering. The more you declutter, some people think, well, you're just dumbing it down. I don't think that's true. You're getting to the essence of what really matters in the story, and people who want to know more will ask for more. But you just wait. You also get a set of steak knives is not the way you're going to win anybody over.
Yeah, right. Yeah, don't be Ron. Was it Ron Papel? Is he the chicken guy? I don't know, I'm having flashbacks of like late night TV when I was a kid, but yeah. I mean, this is slightly better, but the real problem here is you're sharing too much information. And I don't know how many people are on this call right now, but if someone can define for me what the difference between very satisfied and satisfied is, I'll send you $100.
I've always hated that.
Yeah, right. Like my very satisfied could be your satisfied. We've got different levels. So especially when we're talking about Likert scale data, let's just go right ahead and combine. Right? Let's look at our satisfieds. That's going to be most important. Dissatisfieds, and then those neutrals, right? We reduce the number of categories. It doesn't dumb down what we're saying. It lets us focus on the key element, satisfaction.
And I'm telling you, a whole bunch of anxiety leaves my body when I look at this, because it's just my brain is working less to just understand what is it that I'm looking at.
Yeah. And part of that is I removed the labels. And I generally like to remove all my data labels, and you'll see why in the next step, but it can become, we think people care about every single data point, and they don't. Okay. Are you ready to breathe even easier?
I can't wait.
All right. What was the idea that we were focusing on? Going back to the sticky message.
The chat bot, that if you do this, it should be a permanent fixture, and we're better off for doing it.
Right, because it increased satisfaction. So why not just focus on satisfaction? Why bring in questions about why people might have been dissatisfied, right? The focus is what's making things better. So let's just distill it down to that.
And I love that I've always said, don't dig yourself a hole that then you got to dig yourself out of. You show all the dissatisfied. Well, hold on a second. Why are those people dissatisfied? And what are we not doing? And it just takes the conversation off the cliff, because people want to get into a whole bunch of other things we don't want to talk about, or we don't need to talk about in this meeting. So love the simplicity of this, look, once we implemented this chat bot, look at what it did for our satisfaction score, which is really what matters.
Right. And, with data storytelling, some of the books out there say you need to make your audience the hero. And that's true, right? They need to be at the center of all the decisions you make. You need to think about yourself as the narrator, right? You're the one who's giving the level of detail. You're leading them along a path. And if the path is too complicated, right? If you've got too many choices, then you're never going to get to where you want to land.
I have a question / objection.
Sure.
You, in your title, are making a recommendation, it should be become a permanent feature. How do you then back that up with this?
It's a great question. And that's where we need to talk about directing attention, right? I feel like I'm feeding you this, but the thing about the 5Ds is that it's not rocket science, excuse me. You just need someone to show them to you in action, right? And we think about, as we start thinking critically, what else do we need to know? Well, we need to show when we implement in that chat box. We might need to direct attention with, as you said, we've got some notations here. If you notice, I added in a couple of data labels, just a couple, so you could see sort of that 34% fall and now a 50% increase since it's been implemented. And now we can talk about it, right? We've got enough detail to have a conversation, to answer the initial questions people might have, and to keep them focused on the right thing.
So is it fair to say that data storytelling should create a healthy debate, should he create a conversation about where we've been, where we are, where we're going, about why we should do something, about, again, helping, never, I'm a big believer of never attack the person, always attack the idea. And it's not even attack the idea, it's really challenge it to improve it, to make it better, to make sure we're not surprised. And I like friendly fire inside the organization before we go out to market, right? So should a part of that visual storytelling, that data storytelling, be to create a healthy debate on what we're talking about, where we're going, what we're doing, why we should do these things?
Yeah, 100%. And, gone, I hope, right, are the days where you've got your manager who says, we'll do this, right, without input from anyone else. And the discussion, right, the understanding is the key part for moving things forward. And there might be a place, like a keynote, where you're telling your organization how it's going to be or what your goals are. That might not be there for a discussion. But generally, when you're talking about new ideas or understanding data, you want to facilitate that sharing of ideas, that brainstorming. And this is just a starting point, but it's a clear starting point so you can move even further down the finish line.
So can you recap the 5 Ds?
I can. We're going to define our key takeaway. And that's really that sticky message, right? That key thing you need someone to walk away with, and it's what you're spotlighting. And then you're going to build your story around that with just enough detail for your audience to get the right context and support and not overwhelm them. And then we're going to think about our displays, picking visualizations that support the message. And that's generally a simple visualization, even though there are lots of cool things you can do out there. If you need to explain how to interpret the visualization, you've lost your audience already. And then once you've chosen that display, working on decluttering and directing attention, right? Taking the work out of interpreting the data.
So you and I've talked, I love frameworks, the 5D, simple, clear, elegant. Let me play devil's advocate for a second. Increasingly, more and more people you and I meet feel like they're overwhelmed, right? I got a lot on my plate, a lot of deadlines, a lot of things I got to do. It seems like additional work. So help me encourage my team to put in the effort to apply data storytelling, this framework.
Yeah, it does feel like a lot of work. And the first time you go through all 5 steps, it might feel overwhelming. And maybe I'm going to say something controversial here. Data storytelling isn't for every single data conversation that you need to have, right? Doing all these great visualizations, this is for when you really need to, present. But if you're just having a conversation, if we go back to this example, all we did was change the title, right? We thought about the message, we thought about the value. And if that's all you can do, if that's all you have time for, that has earned you like 1,000 points in the eyes of your audience for making their lives easier. And so I think I just want to encourage people to not let the data speak for itself. You need to speak for the data and what you need people to hear, and start working that. And that's where the real value is.
So as a manager, as a leader, what are there some tips? Are there some techniques? What can I do to empower my team to embrace this approach to kind of sharing, and Diedre, every facet of the organization, you see a ton of data. As I said, my comment earlier, data rich, actionable, insight poor. How do you empower the team to embrace this approach and tell more stories with the data that we're bombarded with?
Yeah. I think it's really not just about data, it's about really strong leadership skills as well. So making sure you're calling out people that are doing this and making your life easier, having transparent conversations about what's working and not working with how data is currently communicated with you to help guide people towards what you need. Um, Having someone who's doing a great job with this, lead a lunch and learn, get the buy-in from, again, it's not your manager telling you what to do, it's your teammates talking about the power of this. I think really bringing your team in and not making it a mandate, but bringing them in so you're all speaking the same language about data is a great starting point for getting that buy-in and the understanding of why it's so important.
Love it. So you've worked with a plethora of companies. You've seen a lot of different scenarios. Talk about, I'm gonna use a two-sided coin. Some of the best practices in organizations who embrace this. How do they bring it in? How do they really build a data storytelling culture?
Okay. They're intentional with it, right? They aren't just in it for the 3-hour session, the 6-hour session you teach and the practice. They bring it into their daily work and they use that, shared vocabulary, those shared understandings of techniques to critique and talk about each other's work. And I think when data storytelling and the idea of even just data literacy, talking about and using data regularly is embedded in the work, you're going to have a much greater uptick in people doing it well and the value that it can bring. And so with organizations that have really incorporated data storytelling well, they've put the effort in. And it's not a hear it once and it's going to be in your brain. You got to practice and you got to see how it works in your organization.
Flip the coin. The organizations that stumble or struggle in getting the culture to embrace this data storytelling approach, what's really ailing them?
I think a big challenge can be, well, we've always done it this way, right? We have templates. If you try to change this, someone's going to be upset. Joe's not going to like this report. And so the organizations that have a hard time adopting this often just have a general challenge in change management and experimentation. And I think the biggest challenge that many organizations have is that this is new and this is not like, it's going to take me a little while to get used to this. But I often think, particularly data storytelling, you're saving time. And so it's a persistence in using it in the organization that can help improve that success factor.
Understood. So best practices in terms of getting started.
Just start. I mean, easier said than done. But I like to think, after someone has shown you these data storytelling techniques, your inner critic is active. So whenever you're seeing some data displays or working with data, your mind is telling you what could be done better. Do them, practice them, think about it. Even just thinking about that, what's the point? And making that the first question you ask yourself when you're working with data is going to be the quickest way to sort of transform your thinking around that communication and help you work in those practices.
Do I need to be an artist or creative to do this?
Oh, great question. No, I do it. And I am neither of those things. Give me all the numbers you can possibly give me. The idea is that you're using the concepts. And sure, some people might make something that looks way more beautiful than yours. Often we need functional. And functional comes from following those ideas and not going crazy with design. So you don't need to know, crazy data visualizations, or you don't need to know graphic design or new programs. You just have to be consistent with the concepts and that design will come to you.
Do you use some tools that are easier to embrace? Are there some tools that will help me create? So I've got a ton of data. Again, I know I can do some of this stuff in Excel, but are there some tools that you recommend in helping me simplify or really get to the essence of what I'm trying to present?
Yeah, so everything that I shared with you is just Excel or PowerPoint, because that's often what most people use. I think of data storytelling as being tool agnostic. And so it's really whatever tool you're most comfortable doing analysis in, you can transfer those skills when it comes to the display. This could take us on a tangent, and I don't mean for it to, but with the adoption of generative AI, a lot of that basic level analysis is no longer something that you're churning out and spending time on. You can get the key, I'm not going to call them insights, but you can get the key discoveries sort of at your fingertips in a minute, and then your job is to work through them. So there's not necessarily a tool, there's not a better analysis, software program to use. It's really about what you're comfortable in and what's going to make the most sense for your end product.
Love it. You brought up AI. Talk about your perception of what generative AI is going to do to specifically data storytelling.
Yeah. So I think it's a fantastic tool. I use ChatGPT daily. And what I think a lot of people initially were scared of is that ChatGPT is just going to do everything for us. And it does do a lot of things, but it's not a human. It doesn't make good decisions. And so when it comes to data storytelling, it might suggest a chart, but you still need your context, your background to make sense of what it's saying and how you're going to connect with that person that you're communicating with in the right way. I use ChatGPT to help me write storytelling titles, right? Those narrative titles, to give me some ideas as a brainstorming, a place to start. Because sometimes the way you word things might not be how it's going to hit with your audience. And having a tool to help with that, I think, is actually really powerful for data storytelling.
This has been fascinating. For our audience, if you missed it, you missed a good one. Diedre Downing is the Chief Learning Officer at StoryIQ. And the best way I can describe this conversation is she simplifies the complex and shows you a methodology on how to do that. And it's simple in its elegance. It's simple in its understanding. And I think it increasingly can help both leaders, managers, and certainly their teams tell a more compelling story of not just what's happening, but why. Mm-hmm. And what can we do about it? And how can we impact it? And how can we kind of move it forward? So again, I hope this content has been of interest and value to you. I'm sorry, Jen Cords, my business partner, missed this conversation. We've got some great episodes coming up. So Steve Hardy is the Chief Marketing Officer at Profix. He's going to join us for the next episode and talk about thriving amid continued uncertainty. I just interviewed Steve for a Forbes article. He's got some great insights about account-based experiences, ABX, that we're going to talk about. Jen and I are going to talk about tech bloat. How does it happen? What is it? What does it become? How do we fix it? We've got a great session on ICPs, buyer personas, ideal relationship profiles, and needs-based segmentation. So those are just a few of the upcoming episodes that I hope you'll join us for. On behalf of my partner, Jen Cords, it's been an episode of Intelligent Growth with Diedre Downing of StoryIQ. Diedre, thank you.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. Great. I love chatting data storytelling with you.
It's great to have you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time. All the best. Bye-bye.